I am Stella, 32 years old, from Boston. For as long as I can remember, my weight has been the central focus of my mother's criticism. Every year we gather for Christmas dinner at her house, a tradition that fills me with equal parts nostalgia and dread. This year was supposed to be different. I had news, wonderful news. But before I could share it, my mother dropped those familiar cutting words across the dinner table. "No one will ever marry you, fat girl." I held back tears, but what happened next changed everything. Before I continue with my story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories like mine. Now let me tell you how my Christmas miracle unfolded. Growing up as Diane Marshall's daughter meant living under a microscope, particularly when it came to my appearance. My earliest memories are tainted with her sighs of disappointment whenever I reached for seconds or couldn't fit into clothes she deemed appropriate for a young girl. "A lady always watches what she eats," she would say, removing my plate before I had finished. I was only 7. My father Jack was the buffer between us. He would sneak me cookies when Mom wasn't looking and tell me I was beautiful just the way I was. His warm brown eyes, so similar to my own, never held judgment, only love. "Your mother means well," he would say. "She just wants you to be happy." But happiness in our house was conditional, always tied to the numbers on a scale. When I was 12, everything changed. Dad died suddenly of a heart attack, leaving me alone with my mother and her escalating criticism. Without his protective presence, her comments became more frequent and cutting. "Stella, you need to lose at least 20 pounds before school starts," she announced one summer morning. "No boy will ever ask you to dance if you keep gaining weight." Public humiliation became routine. At the mall, she would loudly compare my size to the mannequins. At restaurants, she would order for me always the salad, always dressing on the side. "My daughter is watching her figure," she would tell waiters with a tight smile, as if we were sharing a special mother-daughter secret, rather than a moment of shame. Meanwhile, my academic achievements collected dust. The straight-A report cards, the creative writing awards, the science fair ribbons, all overshadowed by my expanding waistline. "What good is being smart if no one wants to look at you?" she would ask when I tried to divert her attention to my accomplishments. My sister Amanda had it different. 2 years younger and naturally thin, she was the physical manifestation of everything our mother valued. While I struggled with diets and exercise regimens designed for adults, Amanda floated through childhood on a cloud of maternal approval. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my adolescence. I tried. God, how I tried. I starved myself through sophomore year, lost 30 pounds, and watched as my mother finally showed interest in my existence. But the weight came back as it always does after extreme restriction, and with it her disappointment returned tenfold. "I thought you were finally taking responsibility," she said as she watched me eat a normal-sized dinner. "I guess I expected too much." When college acceptance letters arrived, I chose the school furthest from home, a decision that had less to do with academic reputation and more to do with distance from my mother's critical gaze. Northwestern University became my haven, a place where people seemed to see beyond my size to the person beneath. Each holiday break followed the same pattern, hopeful anticipation of maternal approval, followed by crushing disappointment when nothing had changed. No matter my accomplishments, the first words out of her mouth were always about my appearance. "You've gained weight," she would observe before I could even set down my suitcase. "The freshman 15 turned into the sophomore 30 for you, didn't it?" By senior year, I had stopped expecting things to change. I had also stopped trying to lose weight for her approval. The cycles of dieting and binging had taken their toll, leaving me heavier than when I started college and deeply distrustful of my body's signals. But I had friends who accepted me, professors who respected me, and a future that looked promising despite my mother's predictions of failure. I just needed to survive the holidays. After graduating with honors, I landed a position at a marketing firm in Chicago. My career became my focus, partly because I was good at it, and partly because success in business was the one area of my life where my weight didn't seem to matter. "You're a natural at this," my first boss told me after I landed a major client. You understand people. I rose quickly through the ranks, eventually becoming the youngest marketing executive in the company's history. My colleagues respected me. My clients trusted me. From the outside, I was the picture of success. But inside, I was still that little girl desperate for her mother's approval. My professional confidence never quite translated to my personal life. I dated occasionally, but these relationships inevitably fizzled when my insecurities surfaced. How could anyone love me when my own mother couldn't? This question haunted every romantic interaction, sabotaging potential connections before they could truly begin. You seem to put up walls, one boyfriend told me during our breakup conversation. I never feel like I really know you. How could I explain that the walls weren't just to keep him out, but to keep my fragile self in, that I had spent a lifetime being told I was unlovable because of my body, and that part of me believed it? Chicago provided more than career advancement. It offered distance. 800 miles separated me from my mother's criticism, allowing me to build a life on my own terms. I found an apartment in Wicker Park, a vibrant neighborhood filled with art galleries and coffee shops. I adopted a cat named Winston, a chubby orange tabby who loved me unconditionally. Most importantly, I made friends who saw me really saw me. Jasmine, my neighbor and eventual best friend, never commented on my weight. Instead, she complimented my sense of humor, my intelligence, my kindness, my cooking skills, the things that made me who I was beyond my physical appearance. You know what I love about you, Stella, she said once over our weekly wine night. You listen like nobody else I know. You hear what's not being said. With this new circle of support, I began addressing my emotional eating patterns. Food had always been both comfort and shame, a source of momentary pleasure followed by intense guilt. Breaking this cycle required understanding its origins. I started therapy with Dr. Cooper, a compassionate woman who helped me see the connection between my mother's criticism and my relationship with food. You've been trying to fill an emptiness that food can never satisfy, she observed during one session. Your mother's approval is not something you can earn through weight loss, because her issues have nothing to do with you. This revelation was both freeing and devastating. If I couldn't earn her approval through weight loss, what was the point of trying? And if I stopped trying, who would I be? The answer emerged slowly. Session by session, I began reclaiming my sense of self-worth. I learned to recognize my mother's voice in my head and challenge it. I practiced self-compassion when I looked in the mirror. You are enough just as you are became my daily affirmation. Still, the prospect of holiday gatherings filled me with dread. Each Thanksgiving and Christmas was an exercise in emotional endurance, a test I felt destined to fail. No amount of professional success or personal growth seemed to change the dynamic between us. As December approached, I prepared for the annual Christmas visit with my usual mixture of resignation and faint hope. This year I spent extra time selecting my outfit, a beautiful emerald green dress that complemented my auburn hair and made me feel confident. I practiced responses to potential criticisms. I reminded myself that I was an adult with a life of my own, not a child desperate for approval. Most importantly, I had wonderful news that not even my mother could diminish. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of genuine excitement about going home for Christmas. Maybe this time would be different. I met James Fletcher at a marketing conference in Denver 18 months ago. He was presenting on digital strategy, and I was immediately impressed by his intelligence and the way he handled questions from the audience. He was confident without being arrogant, knowledgeable, without being condescending. What I didn't expect was for him to seek me out during the networking hour. Your question about integrating traditional media with digital campaigns was spot on, he said, extending his hand. James Fletcher. Stella Marshall, I replied, surprised by his interest. Your presentation was excellent. We spent the rest of the evening discussing marketing trends and sharing industry stories. Not once did he make me feel like my size was an issue, like I was somehow less worthy of his attention than the slimmer women in the room. He seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts, my experiences, my perspective. When he asked for my number at the end of the night, I gave it to him, expecting nothing. Men like James, successful and conventionally attractive, didn't date women like me in my experience. I assumed he wanted to discuss work opportunities. I was wrong. He called the next day and asked me to dinner. Not coffee, which could be dismissed as casual or professional, but dinner which was unmistakably a date. "I really enjoyed talking with you," he said. "I'd like to continue our conversation somewhere without name tags and forced mingling." I agreed, but spent the days before our date in a state of anxiety. What would I wear? Would he be disappointed when he saw me again? Was this some kind of cruel joke? James arrived at the restaurant before me and stood when I approached the table. His smile was warm, his eyes appreciative, as they took in my carefully chosen outfit. "You look beautiful," he said, and the sincerity in his voice momentarily silenced my mother's critical voice in my head. Over dinner, I learned that James was divorced with a 9-year-old daughter named Lily. He had primary custody, an arrangement that spoke volumes about his character. His marriage had ended 3 years earlier when his wife decided that family life wasn't what she wanted after all. "Being a single dad has its challenges," he admitted, "but Lily is the best thing that ever happened to me." As the evening progressed, I waited for the usual signs of disinterest that came when men realized my weight wasn't temporary, that this was my body. Instead, James ordered dessert for us to share and lingered over coffee, seemingly reluctant for the evening to end. When he kissed me goodnight, it was gentle and unrushed, a promise rather than a question. "I'd like to see you again," he said. "Soon." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, wondering if this was really happening or if I would wake up tomorrow to find it had been a dream. In the weeks that followed, James proved that his interest was genuine. He called when he said he would. He planned thoughtful dates. He listened when I spoke and remembered the details. He made me laugh until my sides hurt. Most disconcerting of all, he found my body attractive. Not in spite of its size, but because it was mine. "You're gorgeous," he would murmur, his hands tracing curves I had spent a lifetime trying to minimize. "Every inch of you." I didn't believe him at first. How could I? A lifetime of being told I was undesirable had left its mark. I questioned his compliments, doubted his attraction, waited for the other shoe to drop. "Why me?" I asked once, the insecurity impossible to hide. "You could be with anyone." James took my face in his hands, his expression serious. "I don't want anyone. I want you. Your brilliance, your compassion, your humor. The way you see the world. The way you see me." Slowly, almost against my will, I began to trust him. To trust us. The relationship that had begun with a conference question blossomed into something deep and sustaining. My friends approved wholeheartedly. Jasmine declared him the real deal after their first meeting. My cat Winston, notoriously standoffish with strangers, curled up in his lap during his first visit to my apartment. 6 months in, James asked if I was ready to meet Lily. It was a significant step, one that acknowledged the seriousness of our relationship. I agreed, though the prospect of meeting his daughter terrified me almost as much as the thought of introducing him to my mother. Lily turned out to be a miniature version of her father, with the same thoughtful brown eyes and quick smile. She was initially shy, hiding behind James when we were introduced, but warmed up when I mentioned my cat. "I love cats," she said, her first words to me. "Dad says we can't have one because he's allergic, but I think he's making that up." James winked at me over her head. "Busted." By the end of our pizza and movie afternoon, Lily was sitting next to me on the couch, asking questions about my job and telling me about her science project. When it was time for me to leave, she hugged me spontaneously. A moment of acceptance that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. After that, our lives began to intertwine. Weekend outings with Lily, quiet evenings together after she went to bed, holidays, and ordinary days sharing the rhythms of family life. I found myself building relationships not just with James, but with his parents, his sister, the people who mattered to him. A year into our relationship, on a rainy Sunday morning with Lily at a sleepover, James got down on one knee in my kitchen. "Stella Marshall," he said, holding out a ring that sparkled even in the dim light. "I love you more than I thought possible. Will you marry me?" For a moment I couldn't speak. Joy and disbelief warred within me. This wasn't supposed to happen, not to me. Not to the girl who had spent her life being told she was unlovable. "Yes." I finally managed tears streaming down my face. "Yes, I will marry you." The ring fit perfectly, a symbol of belonging I had never expected to wear. As James slipped it onto my finger, I felt a piece of my heart heal a wound so old I had stopped noticing its pain until the moment it began to close. We decided to keep our engagement private for a few weeks, savoring the news just between us and Lily, who was thrilled at the prospect of having me as a stepmother. But as Christmas approached, we agreed it was time to share our happiness with our families. "I want to meet your mother," James said. "We should tell her in person." The thought of introducing James to my mother filled me with conflicting emotions: pride in the wonderful man who had chosen me, and terror at the thought of my mother's reaction. Would she find a way to ruin this too? "She can be difficult," I warned him. "She has very particular ideas about appearance." James squeezed my hand. "I can handle difficult, and I think your appearance is perfect." We made a plan. I would go to my mother's house early on Christmas Day as expected. James would arrive in time for dinner, making a grand entrance with the news of our engagement. It seemed like the perfect way to neutralize any negative comments my mother might make, to present our relationship as a fait accompli rather than something up for her approval. Little did I know how necessary that buffer would prove to be. My mother's house hadn't changed since my childhood. The same pristine white colonial on a tree-lined street in Wellesley, the same immaculate front yard, now dusted with December snow, the same wreath on the door that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread, rather than a home where people actually lived. I parked my rental car in the driveway, checked my appearance one last time in the rearview mirror, and took a deep breath. The emerald green dress felt like armor. The engagement ring glittered on my left hand, though I had turned it around temporarily, hiding the diamond in my palm. I wanted to control when and how this news was shared. "Here goes nothing," I murmured to myself, grabbing the bags of carefully wrapped presents from the passenger seat. The door opened before I could knock my mother's slim figure backlit by the hall light. "Stella," she said, her gaze immediately dropping to assess my body. "I see Chicago agrees with you. You've put on weight since Thanksgiving." And there it was. No hello, no. "Merry Christmas," just an immediate comment on my appearance. The words stung despite my preparation, despite the ring hidden against my palm, despite the knowledge that James would arrive in a few hours to change the narrative forever. "Hello, Mother," I replied, stepping past her into the warmth of the house. "Merry Christmas to you too." The house smelled of pine and cinnamon, the familiar sense of childhood Christmas, overlaid with an artificial perfection that characterized everything my mother did. The tree in the living room was decorated in matching gold and burgundy ornaments, not a light out of place. Family photos lined the mantel, carefully curated to show our best angles, our most presentable moments. "Everyone is in the kitchen," my mother said, following close behind me. "Amanda brought those rolls you like, though you really should be watching your carbs." I bit back a retort and made my way to the kitchen, where the warmth was more than just physical. My sister Amanda was there with her husband Tom, both of them mixing drinks at the counter. My Uncle Paul and Aunt Sarah, my father's brother and his wife, were arranging appetizers on a platter. Cousin Bethany and her husband Dave were setting the table in the dining room beyond. "Stella," Amanda called, abandoning her cocktail shaker to embrace me. At 30, she was still slender and stylish, but the years had softened the childhood competitive edge between us. "I was just telling Tom about that amazing ceviche place you took us to in Chicago last summer." "Best meal of the trip," Tom agreed, giving me a warm hug. "How's the Windy City treating you?" For a few minutes, the conversation flowed easily. I distributed gifts, accepted a glass of wine, and answered questions about work and Chicago life. My mother hovered at the periphery, occasionally interjecting with comments about the food preparation or table settings. "Amanda, those placemats don't match the napkins," She noted her tone, making it clear this was a serious breach of holiday protocol. My sister rolled her eyes behind our mother's back, a small gesture of solidarity that warmed me. Things had improved between Amanda and me since we'd both left home, the artificial rivalry created by our mother's favoritism fading as we built adult lives and perspectives. The afternoon progressed with the surface pleasantries and underlying tensions that characterized all our family gatherings. Aunt Sarah asked about my job, genuinely interested in my recent promotion. Uncle Paul reminisced about Christmases when my father was alive, his eyes misty with nostalgia and whiskey. Cousin Bethany showed pictures of her new house in Providence. Through it all, I felt the weight of the ring against my palm, the secret joy of what was to come when James arrived. I had texted him that everything was proceeding as expected, code for, "My mother is being her usual self, please come rescue me." By 6 o'clock, the dining room table was laden with Christmas dinner. The turkey perfectly browned and arranged on my grandmother's platter. The sides each in matching serving dishes. The candles lit to cast a flattering glow over the proceedings. My mother had always been excellent at creating the appearance of the perfect family holiday. We took our assigned seats, the same arrangement we had used for years. My mother at the head of the table where my father once sat. Amanda and Tom to her right, the position of favor. Me to her left, close enough for quiet criticism. The others arranged according to some algorithm of family hierarchy that only my mother fully understood. "Before we eat," my mother said, raising her wine glass, "I want to toast to family, to those who are here, those who are gone, and those who will join us in the future." Her gaze lingered briefly on Amanda's midsection, a not-so-subtle hint about her desire for grandchildren. We clinked glasses and began passing dishes. The conversation turned to New Year's resolutions, always a dangerous topic in my mother's presence. "I'm thinking of running a half marathon," Amanda offered, helping herself to a modest portion of mashed potatoes. "Wonderful," my mother approved. "Physical fitness is so important." "My firm is doing a charity climb of Mount Rainier," Tom added. "Training starts in January." My mother nodded approvingly, then turned to me. "What about you, Stella? Any fitness goals for the new year?" The familiar knot formed in my stomach. No matter how I answered, it would be wrong. If I mentioned exercise, she would make some comment about it being about time. If I didn't, I was clearly not taking my health seriously enough. Actually, I said, deciding to pivot away from the loaded topic, "I have some exciting news to share." My mother's expression shifted to one of polite skepticism, the look she always wore when I was about to disappoint her. "I've been seeing someone." I continued, feeling the engagement ring press against my palm. "He's wonderful, and we're very serious." The table fell silent. This was clearly not what anyone had expected me to say. My mother's skepticism deepened to disbelief. "You're seeing someone," she repeated flatly. "For how long?" "About 18 months now," I replied, a small part of me enjoying her shock. 18 months, Amanda exclaimed. "Why haven't you mentioned him before?" I shrugged, trying to appear casual, though my heart was racing. I wanted to be sure before I introduced him to the family. My mother set down her fork with deliberate precision. "And what does this man do? What's his name?" "His name is James Fletcher. He's the head of digital strategy for Taylor and Monroe." I provided the information, calmly aware that my mother would immediately look up the company later to verify its prestige. "He sounds lovely," Aunt Sarah said warmly. "Will we get to meet him?" "Actually, yes," I said, unable to keep the smile from my face. "He's joining us for dessert. He should be here any minute." My mother's expression tightened. She disliked surprises, especially ones that disrupted her carefully orchestrated events. "You might have mentioned this earlier, Stella. I'm not sure we have enough dessert." "James isn't much of a dessert person," I assured her, though this was untrue. James loved dessert almost as much as he loved me. "He's really coming to meet all of you." "How nice," my mother said in a tone that suggested it was anything but. "And is this relationship going somewhere, or is he just passing through?" The dismissive phrasing stung. just passing through as if no man would consider a permanent relationship with me, as if I were a tourist attraction rather than a destination. Actually, I began, ready to reveal our engagement. But my mother cut me off before I could finish the sentence. "No one will ever marry you, fat girl." She said the words dropping into the dinner table conversation like stones into still water. "You should be grateful for whatever attention he's willing to give you." The table fell silent. The casual cruelty, the public humiliation, the absolute certainty with which she delivered this assessment, all so familiar, yet still shocking. I felt tears threatening the old pain rising up to choke me, despite all my preparation, all my therapy, all my hard-won self-esteem. Amanda gasped. "Mom, that's a horrible thing to say." But the damage was done. I sat frozen, the half-revealed news of my engagement dying on my lips, the diamond ring digging into my palm as my fist clenched. And then the doorbell rang. The shrill sound of the doorbell cut through the horrible silence that had fallen over the dining room. For a moment no one moved, as if we were characters in a play waiting for the next stage direction. "I'll get it," I finally managed, pushing back my chair. My legs felt unsteady as I walked through the living room to the front door, aware of the tears threatening to spill over. I opened the door to find James standing there earlier than expected, his arms full of flowers and gift bags. Snow dusted his dark hair and the shoulders of his charcoal gray coat. His smile faded the instant he saw my face. "Stella, what's wrong?" he asked, immediately concerned. I shook my head, unable to speak, the lump in my throat too large for words to squeeze past. James set the gifts down on the porch bench and took me in his arms, his warmth enveloping me like a shield. Hey, he murmured against my hair. "Whatever it is, we'll handle it together." Together. Such a simple word, but one that had been missing from my vocabulary for so long. I nodded against his chest, drawing strength from his presence, from the steady beat of his heart against my cheek. "My mother," I whispered. She said—" "I heard," James said quietly, and I pulled back to look at him in confusion. "The window was open a crack," he explained, nodding toward the dining room window a few feet away. I was about to knock when I heard her voice. Fresh humiliation washed over me. He had heard my mother call me fat girl, heard her declare me unworthy of marriage, but instead of embarrassment or pity, his expression held only anger and determination. "Let's go in," he said, retrieving the gifts and flowers. "I think it's time I met your mother." We walked back to the dining room together, his free hand firmly clasping mine. The table was still silent when we entered, all eyes turning to assess the newcomer. I saw the surprise register on my mother's face as she took in James's appearance, his obvious fitness, his expensive coat, the confident way he carried himself. "Everyone, this is James," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "James, this is my family." James set the flowers on the sideboard and stepped forward, his smile polite, but eyes hard as he looked directly at my mother. "You must be Diane," he said, extending his hand. "Stella has told me so much about you." My mother stood visibly flustered and shook his hand. "James, what a pleasant surprise. We were just discussing you." "Yes, I gathered that," James replied, his tone making it clear he had indeed heard her comment. Before my mother could respond, James turned to me, lifting my left hand and gently turning the ring around so that the diamond caught the light. "I think now is the perfect time to make our announcement, don't you?" A collective gasp went around the table as the sizable diamond became visible. My mother's face went pale, her composure cracking for the first time I could remember. "Everyone," James said, his arms sliding around my waist. "I've asked Stella to marry me, and she has done me the great honor of saying yes." "Oh my God," Amanda squealed, jumping up to hug me. "That's amazing, congratulations." The table erupted in exclamations and questions. "How did you meet?" "When's the wedding?" "Let me see the ring," everyone except my mother, who remained frozen in her chair, her expression unreadable. James smoothly fielded questions as he took the empty seat next to mine, his hand never leaving mine as he charmed my relatives with the story of our meeting at the marketing conference, our dates in Chicago, his daughter Lily's approval of our relationship. She's already planning her junior bridesmaid dress, he said with a laugh. Pink with lots of tulle if Stella will allow it. Stella would look lovely in pink for the wedding. My mother finally spoke, attempting to regain control of the situation. It would be slimming. The table fell silent again at this thinly veiled criticism. James's grip on my hand tightened slightly. Stella will be breathtaking in whatever she chooses, he said firmly. Though I must say that emerald green she's wearing right now brings out the gold in her eyes in a way that takes my breath away. He turned to look at me with such genuine admiration that I felt a flush spread across my cheeks. I've always thought Stella's eyes were her best feature. Aunt Sarah jumped in, shooting my mother a warning look. Those martial eyes just like her father's. They're extraordinary, James agreed. Though there's so much about Stella that amazes me, it's hard to choose just one thing. He continued, his voice taking on an edge of steel beneath the politeness. Her brilliance at work, her kindness, her resilience, the strength it takes to remain compassionate after years of unnecessary criticism. The pointed comment hung in the air, unmistakably directed at my mother. No one spoke. Even the sounds of silverware against plates had ceased. "Diane," James said directly, setting down his wineglass. "Before Stella and I announce our engagement to the rest of the world, I want to be clear about something. I fell in love with your daughter exactly as she is. I consider myself the luckiest man alive that she chose me, and I will never ever allow anyone to speak to her the way I just heard you speak to her through that window." My mother flinched as if she had been slapped. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean," she said, her voice brittle. "I only want what's best for Stella." "No, Mom," I said, finally finding my voice. Years of therapy, months of love from James, and the sheer shock of the moment combined to give me courage I had never felt in this house. "You want what looks best to other people. You've never once asked what would make me happy." "That's not true," she protested. "Everything I've ever done has been for your own good." Making me feel worthless was for my own good. I asked, tears threatening again, but from anger now rather than hurt. Criticizing my body since I was a child was for my own good. Telling me no one would ever love me was for my own good. "I never said that." My mother backpedaled. "You just did 10 minutes ago," Amanda interjected, surprising me with her support. "We all heard you, Mom. No one will ever marry you, fat girl. Those were your exact words." My mother looked around the table, seeking support, but found none. Uncle Paul was studying his plate with great interest. Aunt Sarah was watching me with a mixture of pride and sorrow. Cousin Bethany looked deeply uncomfortable. Only Amanda met our mother's gaze, directly challenging her to deny what she had said. "I may have spoken harshly," my mother conceded, her voice small, "but I only ever wanted Stella to be happy." "Then you should be thrilled right now," James said, his arm still steady around my waist. "Because I promise you making Stella happy is my life's mission." "And he succeeds," I added, leaning into his strength. "Every day." For the first time in my life, I saw my mother at a loss for words. The carefully constructed narrative of maternal concern that had justified her cruelty for so many years was crumbling before her eyes. "I think," I said, standing up and gathering my purse, "that James and I will be going now. We have other plans for Christmas evening." "But you just got here," my mother protested weakly. "We haven't had dessert." "I've had my fill," I replied, the double meaning clear to everyone at the table. As we prepared to leave, Amanda pulled me aside in the hallway. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I should have stood up for you more over the years." I hugged her, feeling a new warmth between us. "It's not your fault. She pitted us against each other from the beginning." "Still," Amanda insisted, "I'm going to do better from now on, starting with being the best maid of honor ever if you'll have me." "I'd love that," I said, surprised and touched by the offer. As James and I walked out the front door, leaving behind the stunned silence of my family Christmas, I felt lighter than I had in years, as if I had set down a burden I hadn't realized I was still carrying. "Are you okay?" James asked, as we got into his car. Snowflakes dancing in the beams of the headlights. I considered the question carefully. Was I okay? My mother had humiliated me as she had done countless times before. But this time, something was different. This time I had stood up for myself. This time, I had someone standing beside me. Yes, I said, realizing it was true. For the first time in that house, I actually am. James smiled, relief evident in his eyes. Good, because Lily is waiting for us at the hotel with Chinese food and Christmas movies. I told her we might need a rescue plan. I laughed, the sound strange and wonderful after the tension of the evening. You planned a rescue mission. I know how family can be, he said simply, especially at Christmas. As we drove away from the house that had never truly felt like home, I realized that I was driving towards something better, something real. A family of my own choosing, built on love rather than criticism, acceptance rather than impossible standards. For the first time in my life, I was truly going home for Christmas. We left my mother's house in silence, the weight of the confrontation heavy between us, despite the small victory it represented. Once in the car, I let out a long, shuddering breath, tears finally spilling over now that we were alone. I'm sorry, James said softly, reaching over to take my hand. I know that wasn't how you wanted the evening to go. I shook my head, wiping at my tears. No, it's not that. I don't know. Relieved. All these years I've been so careful around her, walking on eggshells, accepting her criticism as if I deserved it. And now finally saying what I really feel. You were magnificent, James assured me, squeezing my hand. Truly. The drive to the hotel where James and Lily were staying was short, but it gave me time to compose myself. I didn't want to greet his daughter with red eyes and tear-stained cheeks on Christmas night. When we reached their suite, Lily was waiting in festive pajamas, her excitement palpable as she bounced on the edge of the bed. Did you tell them? Did you show them the ring? What did they say? The questions tumbled out before we had even closed the door behind us. James laughed, lifting her into a hug. Yes, we told them. Yes, we showed them the ring. And they were surprised. Good surprised or bad surprised? Lily asked, her perceptiveness sometimes startling for a child her age. James and I exchanged a look. A little of both, I answered honestly. But the important thing is that we're all together now. Lily seemed to accept this, pulling me into a hug of my own. I ordered extra dumplings for you, she whispered conspiratorially. Dad says they're your favorite. The simple kindness, the thoughtfulness of this child who had accepted me into her life without reservation, brought fresh tears to my eyes. Thank you, sweetheart, I managed. That's exactly what I need tonight. We spent the rest of Christmas evening in a bubble of comfort, watching Elf on the hotel television, eating Chinese food, straight from the containers, and laughing at Lily's running commentary on the movie she had clearly seen dozens of times before. It was so different from the formal Christmas dinners of my childhood, where everything had to be perfect and joy was secondary to appearance. This messy, impromptu celebration felt more like Christmas than anything I had experienced since my father died. When Lily finally fell asleep between us on the hotel bed, surrounded by fortune cookie wrappers and wearing the paper crown from her Christmas cracker, James turned to me. I meant what I said at your mother's, he told me, his voice low to avoid waking his daughter. No one gets to speak to you that way. Not ever again. I nodded, grateful beyond words for his protection, but knowing that the situation with my mother was more complicated than a single confrontation could resolve. She'll call tomorrow, I predicted. She always does after she's gone too far. She'll act like nothing happened, or she'll say I misunderstood. That's her pattern. James frowned. You don't owe her forgiveness or even a conversation if you're not ready. I know, I said, but I need to handle this my way. For me, not for her. James nodded, understanding in his eyes. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. True to prediction, my mother called the next morning. I let it go to voicemail, not ready to speak with her while the wound was still so fresh. Her message was exactly as I had expected, glossing over her cruelty with vague references to tension and misunderstandings. Call me back, Stella. We need to discuss wedding plans. I'm thinking June at the country club. I deleted the message without responding. For the next week, I focused on enjoying the rest of the Christmas break with James and Lily. We visited the aquarium, went ice skating in the park, and spent New Year's Eve watching fireworks from the hotel rooftop, Lily bundled in blankets as she fought to stay awake until midnight. My mother continued calling. I continued not answering. It wasn't until we were back in Chicago, the holiday decorations packed away and normal life resuming, that I finally felt strong enough to respond. "I think you should meet her in person," my therapist, Dr. Cooper, suggested during our first session of the new year. "Not at her house where the power dynamic is in her favor, but somewhere neutral, and not alone." "James offered to come with me," I said, twisting my engagement ring, still not used to its presence on my finger. "That's an option," Dr. Cooper agreed. "But consider what you need from this conversation. Is it about your relationship with James, or your relationship with your mother?" The question stayed with me for days. What did I want from this conversation? What outcome would help me move forward? Not just with wedding planning, but with my life. When I finally called my mother back, I was clear about my conditions. "I'll meet you for coffee at the Wellesley Cafe next Saturday at 10. Just the two of us. 1 hour." "That's not nearly enough time to discuss wedding arrangements," she protested. "And why not at the house? It's much more private." "This isn't about wedding arrangements," I told her firmly. "This is about whether you'll be invited to the wedding at all. 1 hour, mother. That's what I'm offering." The silence on the other end of the line told me I had finally gotten through to her. This wasn't going to be like all the other times when she had crossed a line, and I had eventually forgiven her without any real acknowledgement of the harm done. "Fine," she conceded. "Saturday at 10. I flew back to Boston the following weekend, James seeing me off at the airport with a supportive hug and the reminder that I could call him any time for any reason. "Remember, you're setting the terms here," he said. "Not her." The Wellesley Cafe was busy when I arrived, exactly as I had hoped. The crowd provided both witness and buffer, making it harder for my mother to dismiss or deny what had happened at Christmas dinner. She was already seated when I arrived, perfectly put together as always, in a camel hair coat and pearls. But there was something different about her, a hesitancy I wasn't used to seeing in her usually confident demeanor. "Stella," she said, standing as I approached. She leaned in for a kiss on the cheek, which I allowed, but did not return. "You look well." "Thank you," I said, sitting down across from her. A waitress immediately appeared to take our order, 2 lattes, the small ritual buying me time to gather my thoughts. When we were alone again, my mother launched into what was clearly a prepared speech. "I want to apologize for what happened at Christmas. I spoke without thinking. You know I would never intentionally hurt you." It was the classic non-apology. I spoke without thinking, rather than I said something cruel. You know I would never hurt you, rather than I did hurt you. "But you did hurt me," I said calmly. "You've been hurting me my entire life with comments about my weight, my appearance, my worthiness. What you said at Christmas was just the latest in a lifetime of cruelty." My mother's face flushed with indignation. "Cruelty? I've only ever wanted what's best for you. The world is not kind to overweight women, Stella. I was trying to protect you." "By making me feel worthless?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the emotion building in my chest. "By telling me no one would ever love me. How exactly was that protection?" "I never said no one would love you," my mother protested. "You said, and I quote, 'No one will ever marry you, fat girl,' in front of our entire family, on Christmas Day, just as I was about to announce my engagement." I laid out the facts without emotion, watching her face as the reality of her words sank in. "I may have said something like that," she admitted reluctantly, "but I didn't know you were engaged." "Would it have made a difference?" I asked. "If you had known James had proposed, would you have kept that thought to yourself? Or would you have found some other way to undermine my happiness to make me feel undeserving of it?" My mother looked genuinely shocked at the accusation. "Why would I want to undermine your happiness? You're my daughter." "That's what I've been trying to understand for years," I said. "Why would a mother constantly criticize her daughter's appearance, ignore her accomplishments, and make her feel unlovable? What purpose does that serve?" The question hung between us, more honest than any conversation we had ever had. For a long moment, my mother said nothing, her perfectly manicured hands wrapped around her latte cup as if seeking warmth. "Your father always said I was too hard on you," she finally said, her voice softer than I was used to hearing it. "He said I was projecting my own insecurities onto you." It was my turn to be surprised. "Dad said that—" My mother nodded. "We fought about it often. He thought I was trying to prevent you from making the same mistakes I had made, but in the process, I was making new mistakes." "What mistakes?" I asked, genuinely curious now. My mother had always presented herself as infallible, her life choices beyond question. She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Heavier as a young woman. Not as much as not overweight exactly, but not as thin as I became later. I struggled with it. Boys in high school were cruel. College wasn't much better." This was news to me. There were no photographs of my mother as a young woman in our house, no evidence of this past self she was describing. "I lost the weight before I met your father," she continued. "Strict dieting, excessive exercise. It worked, but the fear of gaining it back never left me. And when you started to struggle with your weight as a child, all that fear came rushing back." "So you transferred that fear to me," I said, understanding beginning to dawn. "You weren't trying to help me. You were trying to save yourself." My mother looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "It wasn't conscious. I really did think I was protecting you. By making me hate myself." The words came out sharper than I intended, the hurt of decades still raw despite this new context. "I never wanted you to hate yourself," she insisted. "I wanted you to change yourself. I thought that would make you happy." "But it never made you happy, did it?" I observed. "No matter how thin you stayed, you were always afraid of becoming that girl again, the one boys were cruel to. You never escaped her." My mother's eyes filled with tears, a sight so unfamiliar, it momentarily stunned me into silence. Diane Marshall did not cry, at least not in front of others. It was one of her many rules of proper behavior. "No," she admitted. "I never did." We sat in silence for a moment, the noise of the cafe washing over us as we both absorbed the implications of this confession. "I'm not you, Mom," I finally said. "And my journey isn't yours. James loves me exactly as I am. He has from the beginning. No ultimatums, no conditions, just love. He seems like a good man," my mother acknowledged, wiping discreetly at her eyes. "He is," I agreed. "And he's going to be my husband. The question is, do you want to be part of that? Because if you do, things have to change between us." "What things?" she asked, a hint of her usual defensiveness returning. "No more comments about my weight. No more suggestions about diets or exercise, unless I ask specifically for your input. No more acting like my body is a problem to be solved." I laid out my conditions clearly without room for misinterpretation. "And if I slip up," she asked, "then I'll remind you of this conversation. And if it continues, I'll limit our contact." The boundary felt strange to articulate, but right. Necessary. "I see," my mother said, absorbing the new terms of our relationship. "And the wedding? We haven't set a date yet, but it will probably be in the fall," I told her. "Small ceremony, close friends and family only. If you can respect my boundaries, I'd like you to be there." My mother nodded slowly. "I would like that too." It wasn't a complete resolution. Years of damage couldn't be undone in a single coffee conversation. But it was a beginning, an acknowledgement of the problem, and a commitment to change. As we parted outside the cafe, my mother hugged me briefly, awkwardly, as if just learning how. "I am happy for you, Stella," she said. "I want you to know that." "Thank you," I replied, choosing to accept the words at face value, a small gift from a woman who had rarely offered them. On the flight back to Chicago, I called James to fill him in on the conversation. "How do you feel?" he asked when I had finished recounting the meeting. I considered the question carefully. Cautiously optimistic, she seemed genuinely shocked when I pointed out how her behavior has affected me. I don't think she ever connected those dots before. "Do you think she can change His skepticism was understandable given what he had witnessed at Christmas. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But I'm not basing my happiness on whether she does or not. That's the difference now." James's voice was warm with pride. "That's my girl." In the weeks that followed, my mother made visible efforts. Our phone conversations, previously landmines of potential criticism, became almost pleasant as she carefully avoided commenting on my appearance and asked instead about my work, my friends, my wedding plans. Amanda called to report similar changes in her own interactions with our mother. "It's weird," she said. "She asked about my job the other day and actually listened to the answer. No pivot to when Tom and I are having babies, or whether I'm still doing that Pilates class." "Christmas was a wake-up call," I suggested. "More like a nuclear detonation." Amanda laughed. "But whatever works." As spring approached, bringing with it the start of serious wedding planning, I braced myself for the inevitable clash of visions. My mother would want formal and traditional the country club wedding she had mentioned in her voicemail. James and I were thinking of something more intimate, perhaps an outdoor ceremony at the botanical gardens where we had spent so many Sunday afternoons. To my surprise, when I mentioned the gardens during a phone call, my mother simply asked questions about the venue, the logistics, the contingency plans for rain. "It sounds lovely," she said. "Very you." The simple acknowledgement of my preferences without attempt to override or redirect felt like a small miracle. "Thanks, Mom." I said, the gratitude genuine. "That means a lot." Our wedding day dawned clear and cool, the perfect September Saturday we had hoped for when booking the Chicago Botanical Gardens 6 months earlier. The ceremony would be held in the Rose Garden, with its circular pathways and trellised archways, followed by a reception in the adjacent glass-walled pavilion overlooking the water. I stood before the mirror in the garden's bridal suite, my best friend Jasmine making final adjustments to my hair, as Amanda secured the last pearl button on my dress, a custom design that celebrated rather than concealed my curves. "You look absolutely stunning," Jasmine declared, stepping back to admire the full effect. The woman in the mirror smiled back at me, radiant in ivory lace auburn hair, swept up with tendrils framing her face, eyes bright with joy and anticipation. For the first time in my life, I looked at my reflection and felt only happiness without the shadow of my mother's critical voice in my head. "James is going to lose his mind when he sees you," Amanda predicted, her own eyes suspiciously bright. "In the best possible way." A soft knock at the door interrupted the moment. "Is everyone decent?" my mother's voice called. "Come in, Mom," I answered, bracing myself slightly despite the progress we had made over the past months. My mother entered elegant in a silver blue dress that complemented without competing. She stopped short at the sight of me, one hand rising to her throat. "Oh, Stella," she breathed. "You're beautiful." The words spoken with genuine emotion, rather than the qualified praise I was accustomed to, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thank you." I managed, blinking rapidly to preserve my carefully applied makeup. "I brought you something," my mother said, recovering her composure. "For your something borrowed." She opened a velvet box to reveal a pair of pearl and diamond earrings I recognized from my childhood, worn by my mother only on the most special occasions. "These were your grandmother's," she explained, though I already knew the history. "She wore them on her wedding day, and I wore them on mine." I accepted the box, touched by the gesture. "I'd be honored to wear them." As Amanda helped me put on the earrings, my mother's gaze traveled over my dress, taking in the details of the design. "The lace is exquisite," she observed. "You chose perfectly." No mention of whether it was slimming. No suggestions for more strategic corsetry. Just simple, straightforward approval of my choice. Another small victory in our evolving relationship. "James's father is waiting to walk you down the aisle," she said, smoothing a non-existent wrinkle from her dress. "Whenever you're ready." This had been one of the more emotional decisions of the wedding planning, who would take the traditional father's role with my own father gone. James's father, Robert, had welcomed me into their family with such warmth and genuine affection that the choice felt natural. I had worried about my mother's reaction. "I'm ready," I said, gathering my bouquet of blush roses and eucalyptus. The The ceremony passed in a blur of emotion and sensory impressions, the string quartet playing Pachelbel's canon as I walked between the rose-covered trellises. Robert's steady arm beneath my hand, his whispered, "He's a lucky man," as we began our procession. The assembled guests intimate at just 60 of our closest friends and family, and James waiting for me beneath an arch of white roses, his expression transforming from nervous anticipation to awestruck joy as he caught sight of me. Beside him, Lily bounced on her toes in excitement, resplendent in the pink junior bridesmaid dress she had campaigned for, modified to a more elegant design than her original tulle fantasy. When Robert placed my hand in James's, the connection felt like coming home. The minister's words, our carefully written vows. The exchange of rings all unfolded with a dreamlike quality, significant yet surreal. James's vows brought fresh tears to my eyes. "Stella, you walked into that conference room in Denver and rearranged my entire world," he began. "Your intelligence challenged me. Your laugh captivated me. Your compassion humbled me. And your beauty, every inch of you inside and out, overwhelms me daily." He continued, each word a declaration not just of love, but of seeing, truly seeing me. "I promise to stand beside you to support your dreams as you've supported mine, to be your partner in all things, and to remind you every day of your worth, which has never ever been in question." My own vows, practiced countless times in the mirror, now flowed easily, a promise to this man who had helped me find my voice, to his daughter, who had opened her heart to me, to the family we were creating together. When the minister pronounced us husband and wife, the kiss we shared felt like a beginning and a culmination all at once, the start of our official life together and the natural progression of the love that had been growing between us for nearly 2 years. The reception that followed was everything we had hoped for, intimate, yet joyful, elegant, without being stuffy. James and I shared our first dance to Ella Fitzgerald's "At Last," a choice that made several of our friends tear up, knowing how long both of us had waited to find the right partner. As the evening progressed, I found myself continually surprised by my mother's behavior. She charmed James's parents, complimented the choices James and I had made for the reception, and even joined in a conga line led by my more exuberant colleagues from the marketing firm. "Your mom seems different," Jasmine observed as we stood by the dessert table watching the dancing. "Less, I don't know, judgmental." "She's trying," I acknowledged. "We both are." The most surprising moment came during the father-daughter dance, traditionally a bittersweet time for brides without fathers. James had suggested I dance with Robert, an offer I appreciated, but felt uncertain about, not wanting to impose or create awkwardness. As the DJ announced the dance, my mother approached me at our table. "I know I can't replace your father," she said quietly, "but if you'd like, perhaps we could share this dance." The offer, so unexpected and so unlike the mother I had grown up with, left me momentarily speechless. "I'd like that very much," I finally managed. As we moved to the center of the dance floor, my mother's hand light on my waist, I caught James's eye across the room. He nodded, understanding the significance of the moment without need for explanation. "Your father would have been so proud today," my mother said as we began to move to the music, a gentle instrumental version of "What a Wonderful World." "Do you think so?" I asked, the old desire for parental approval never quite extinguished despite all the progress I had made. "I know so," she assured me. "He always saw you more clearly than I did." It wasn't a full apology for all the years of criticism, all the damage done in the name of protection, but it was an acknowledgement, and on this day of new beginnings, that felt like enough. The honeymoon that followed was a blissful 10 days in Hawaii. James and I finally alone after months of wedding planning and years of building our careers. We swam in the warm Pacific waters, hiked to secluded waterfalls, and made love in our beachfront bungalow with the windows open to the sound of the waves. For the first time in my adult life, I wore a bathing suit without a cover-up, walked on the beach without worrying about judgmental stares, allowed myself to be photographed without angling for the most flattering pose. "You look happy," James observed one evening as we watched the sunset from our private lanai, tropical drinks in hand. "I am happy," I confirmed the simple truth of it, still sometimes surprising. Happier than I ever thought possible. Good, he said, leaning over to kiss me. That's all I've ever wanted. Returning to normal life after the wedding and honeymoon brought its own adjustments. James and Lily moved into my Chicago apartment temporarily, while we house hunted for a place with more space, the three of us learning to navigate the rhythms of daily family life together. My relationship with my mother continued to evolve, each conversation a careful dance of new patterns replacing old habits. There were still missteps, moments when a thoughtless comment would slip out or an old trigger would be activated. But there was also a new willingness on both our parts to acknowledge these moments, to address them directly, rather than pretending they hadn't happened. 6 months after the wedding, I started a support group for people with critical parents, drawing on my own experience and the insights gained through therapy. The group, which met monthly in a community center near our new home, quickly grew from 5 participants to 15 each, with their own story of parental criticism and the scars it had left. "You've helped me so much," one woman told me after a particularly emotional session. "Just knowing I'm not alone, that other people understand, it's changed everything." Her words reminded me of how I had felt when James had first entered my life, the profound shift that comes with being truly seen and accepted. It wasn't that he had saved me, the fairy tale version of our story, that my younger self might have imagined. Rather, his love had created a safe space for me to save myself, to reclaim the self-worth that had been buried under years of criticism. On the anniversary of that fateful Christmas dinner, James, Lily, and I invited my mother to join us for a holiday meal at our new house, a renovated Victorian in a family-friendly neighborhood, with a fenced yard for the puppy Lily had convinced us to adopt. As we gathered around the table, the contrast to the previous year's disaster could not have been more stark. Here was warmth, genuine affection, easy conversation. My mother brought a photo album I had never seen before, filled with pictures of my father and me that she had kept private for years. "I thought you might like to have these," she said, passing me the album. "For Lily, too, so she can know her grandfather at least a little." The gesture, like so many small moments over the past year, represented progress rather than perfection. My mother was still my mother, with all her ingrained habits and attitudes. But she was trying, and so was I, to build something new from the damaged foundation of our past relationship. Looking around the table at James carving the turkey with exaggerated ceremony to make Lily laugh at my mother actually eating a full portion of mashed potatoes without comment about carbs at the home we had created, filled with love and acceptance, I felt a sense of peace I had never experienced during the holidays. The journey from that devastating Christmas comment, "No one will ever marry you, fat girl," to this moment of genuine family harmony had been neither straight nor easy. There had been setbacks and difficult conversations, tears and reconciliations. But sitting here now, wearing my comfortable holiday sweater, without a single thought about whether it was flattering, I knew with absolute certainty that the journey had been worth it. My worth had never been tied to my weight. My lovability never dependent on fitting someone else's idea of beauty. The truth I had finally embraced was both simple and profound. I deserved love exactly as I was and always had. And now, surrounded by people who saw me clearly and loved me completely, I had finally learned to give that same unconditional love to myself. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up to family criticism or create boundaries with loved ones? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they too are worthy of love exactly as they are. Thank you for listening, and remember, the family that truly matters is the one that celebrates you rather than trying to change you.